This is your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lyndsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. So we have all heard the phrases, go with your gut, trust your gut. I have a gut feeling. This is gut wrenching, right? All of these are descriptions of emotional feelings, and they can be both pleasant and unpleasant. But in my opinion, we definitely need to start going with our gut a little bit more than we do. And why is this? Well, okay. So I kind of thought I felt kind of stupid when I read this book, because I was like, God, this is so smart. How the fact that I didn't connect these dots about your gut and your health and your emotions. So anyways, I just finished reading a book called When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate, and it explores the stress disease connection. And one of the portions of the book talks about our gut and stress. And geez Louise, am I a stress ball? And my gut totally is affected by my life, just like hard stop. And I never really connected my tummy with emotions, things that were going into my life, super emotional or traumatic or whatever. I just didn't make any connection between all of the emotions and trauma and stuff in life and stress and my tummy woes. So there's a quote in this book, chronically stressful emotional patterns could induce inflammatory disease in the gut through the activation of pro-inflammatory molecules by stress. The gut or intestinal tract is much more than an organ of digestion. It is a sensory apparatus of its own, intimately connected to the brain's emotional centers. That's like, whoa. Like, really? Our gut is like a little brain in there. And I think it's crazy to think about it. And so my guest today is going to talk a little bit about that along with her story with her gut stuff. So it just sounds like our little tummies are our brains in regards to emotions. And since I deal with massive gut issues, I have leaky gut, Google it, and a gnarly anxiety that causes, upset stomach. My pain causes gut issues. I've developed that cute little eating disorder that I've mentioned on the show, which is very hard for me to say out loud, but I'm still talking about it because it's very important that I am honest with myself about what I've done to my body because of trauma, emotions, and CRPS. So our guts are inseparable from the psychological processing that each moment gauges and reacts to the stimuli in our environments, right? So our gut is our intuition. That's nuts. And so anyways, I meet this sassy little chick, Rachel. She is a gut health nutritionist and approaches her wellness from an integrated standpoint that includes evaluating environmental factors, emotional stress, and mental well-being. And she traveled down the path of feeling lost and unsure of what was triggering her gut symptoms. So she kind of just started her own, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to do it my way. Because as we all know, we go to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and they are treating us like everybody instead of each person having their own body. So without further ado, I'm going to bring to you my sweet little love, Rachel Kalmar. Hi, babe.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's talk about some stuff that kind of stinks. Let's talk about some of this gut-wrenching stuff that you've been through, that I definitely have been through and currently go through. So I'd like to roll out the red carpet for you. And let's start about talking about your gut and why you're basically here with me today.
Firstly, I also still go through things. I feel like it's going to be a forever thing for me. But yeah, I honestly, like you said, the same thing with everybody else that I'm sure you've spoken to and that has a similar story, where you're just being passed from one specialist to another specialist, to another specialist, to another specialist who still knows nothing. You start to question yourself, like, is this in my head or am I actually experiencing something and they're just not able to pick up on it? And after being told I had a likelihood diagnosis of chronic fatigue immune dysfunction, I was like, I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm not participating in any type of medical trial. And it wasn't for another, at that point, 6 months that I was still going to have to wait. And I thought, no, this is not it. And that was really like my moment or my aha moment being like, I'm not waiting for a medical treatment trial. This doesn't feel right for me. My gut told me so. Like,
there you go. Yeah, I love that. My gut tells it's true.
My gut was just like, absolutely not. This is not your path. There has to be a better way. My dad was struggling from ulcerative colitis. My mom had quote unquote IBS. My sister had quote unquote IBS. I had God knows what. And I was like, there has to be, besides the fact that we're all Jewish, something else going on. And I stumbled upon I don't know if you've heard of the autoimmune paleo protocol.
I haven't.
It's a very, very intense protocol. You are cutting out anything and everything that can lead to inflammation. That looks like gluten, dairy, legumes, beans. So think coffee and chocolate, like my two favorite things in the world, nuts and seeds. Those were things that I had every day. And you don't realize you're having nuts as a snack, nut milk. You're making baked goods with your nut flour if you're gluten-free and dairy-free, and like this overabundance of nuts that lead to inflammation. You cut all of that out, and I swear to you, my pain went away, not all of it, but a lot of it in 2 weeks.
And what kind of pain were you suffering from specifically?
So for me, it felt like every day I was dealing with a new symptom and taking a picture of something else that had developed to send to my doctor. So I was doing interval training on the treadmill, and that evening, my knee blew up, literally blew up. And all of a sudden, a week later, the other knee blew up and I hadn't done anything. And then I tore a disc in my neck, unprovoked. I had no car injury, no nothing. And then I had wrist pain that would lead to elbow pain, like everything. It was just traveling along my body. There was no reason aside from diet and stress and like things that you had just mentioned. There really wasn't any reason for any of this to be happening. I was at that point a 21-year-old girl in university. Like it really just, there was no explanation. It wasn't like I was in some huge car wreck.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I was like, hey, no, this is insane. Although I will tell you, my mom would tell me that ever since I was a little girl, I always had stomach issues. I was always on the toilet. I was always like, I think I'm going to throw up, or I just had to sit there. Like that was from very, very little.
Huh.
So just like my whole body was a mess. And and that's why I was like, there has to be a natural way. I'm not waiting for a drug. And then all that chronic pain in my body, like joint wise, really started to subside after about 2 weeks of cutting everything out. And it was hard.
Yeah. So what is an example, if you will? Because I'm sitting here, I'm talking a lot over the next couple weeks about nutrition, because gut and nutrition, because that is absolutely the number one factor in my world that I have no control over, because I'm out of control as a controlling human being, as an OCD freak. Like everything's in its place and everything's color coded and everything looks like she's just doing great. I don't eat. And when I do, it's a very small amount, and it's probably not, it's typically always healthy, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything that you just rattled off. I'm like, fuck, I ate all of that yesterday.
Yeah.
Outside of gluten and dairy, because I'm like 95% gluten free, and dairy, the only thing I will eat is a little bit of cheese if I have a taco. Other than that, I don't put cheese on anything. And that's the hardest thing I've had to do. So give me an example of a day in the life of this protocol, because I'm like, oh no.
Okay, before I get there, this is what I like to say to people who are struggling with any type of gut issue and pain. When they tell me I just have a little bit, I always like to say, would a recovering alcoholic just have a little bit of beer? Or would a recovering smoker just have one drag of a cigarette?
I don't like you right now.
Just because you're having a little bit doesn't mean you're not still creating inflammation in the body and perpetuating this cycle. And your body's like, I need to stop.
Yeah, my body's screaming at me.
It
just
is
screaming. Yeah,
it is. And so that's why whenever in my previous life, when I was working with clients, it would be like, okay, for the duration of the time that we're working together, no gluten, no dairy, no X, no Y, no Z, because then I'm doing this like tug of war and push and pull. And I'm not sure if what I'm doing is really, truly helping you, because we're still eating things that are creating inflammation in the body, and it makes it very tough to heal. I'll get frustrated, you'll get frustrated, and it'll just be like a whole conundrum. So it's very important. We're not just having a little bit, we're having none of it until our symptoms start to subside and we start to heal.
Okay. And then once you heal, you may or may not be able to implement things back into your world, but only like one at a time. Like as soon as you're like, oh, great. No, don't go out and eat gluten and a bottle of wine and a lump of brie cheese and be like, wow, I don't feel good.
No. And here's why, because it can take up to 72 hours to actually experience any type of reaction or symptom. So you could have, and you don't go all in either. You don't have a pizza, or you would say, I'm going to have a bite of an egg, like, because people are typically really reactive to. So they'd be like, I'm going to have a bite of the yolk today. And if in 3 days nothing has changed, you don't have a headache or you don't have like any other gut upset, okay, I'm going to have 2 bites. Everything has to be super slow, because then you can pinpoint what can I handle and also what's bothering me, because it takes 72 hours to have any type of reaction like that. But back to, what does a day in the life of AIP look like?
Yeah. If you saw her face, she's like,
I want to be wholeheartedly honest with you. While I was going through what I was going through with my gut, I ended up with, and I had shared this with you, disordered eating as well.
Yeah.
I'm very open about it now, but was very closed about it before. But, it's hard to want to eat and want to go out with your friends and like enjoy yourself when you feel like shit, no matter what you eat. And it's confusing and it creates food anxiety. And so you just develop these, thoughts in your head where you're like, I'd rather fast. So for me, if I had a date, for example, I would eat breakfast and I would fast all day until I got to dinner, because I didn't want to be bloated. I wanted to feel good in my clothing. Sexy, of course. And
of course, you're going on a hot date.
Yeah, I feel sexy, all bloated. So, and then when I got into AIP and I removed all the stuff from my diet, and my bloating went down significantly, but it drove the eating disorder because I wasn't eating a lot and I lost a lot of weight because a lot of the inflammation went down. And I was like, oh, well, if I just keep eating like this, I'm going to stay this weight or I'm going to get smaller. And it effed me up because it screwed up my thyroid. It screwed up everything. And I gained so much weight back. So it was like you have to get into that balance. But when
balance, what's that word?
When you remove all these foods and you're reducing inflammation in the body, oftentimes you do see weight loss pretty quickly, especially in the face and in like the chest, where all the lymph is being stored, because that starts to flow as we reduce inflammation, especially in the tummy. When we're not so bloated, we're going to drop a pant size because our stomach isn't looking like we're 6 months pregnant. But it was hard. It was every day making my own food. And that's actually, not only was it just wanting to learn more about holistic health and natural health, but I went to school for it because I was going to create a product that was AIP compliant, because in Canada, there really wasn't anything. And all the states had the really amazing brands. And I was like, I want people to know that I have the education behind me to do this.
Oh, yeah, we're really great here in the United States, aren't we?
You have some really innovative brands. You do. Like the most incredible brands that we pay literally an arm and a leg to get here.
Well, just let me know what you need and I'll buy them here and I will send them to you. We've talked about this on other calls, my dear.
No, you guys
are other items as well.
You guys are really lucky in that sense. You have like really innovative creators in your world. And also our regulations are different. So that might have something to do with it. But, for example, Siete Foods is fantastic. They were born because one of their children had a lot of sensitivity. So they're like a tortilla chip that's grain-free. You have Purely Elizabeth, Hugh Kitchen, Simple Mills, all these fantastic brands that like cater to people who can't have or choose not to have certain ingredients. And they're mindful of seed oils and all the things that we don't want to be consuming.
Okay. So we talked about that, but give me a day of like, what were you eating?
Oh my God. Okay. In the morning, I would wake up and I had pre-made these plantain muffins. So it was like plantain, carrot, shredded carrot, like, I don't know, parsnip. And I would put coconut butter on them because remember, no nuts and seeds. So I had to that was something. And then midday, I would probably have seaweed. I love sea snacks, roasted seaweed. So, so good.
I almost just barfed a little. I'm sorry. I turned a little green.
I would pre-make because chocolate's my favorite thing in the world, and you can't have chocolate, but you can have carrot powder. So I would pre-make these fudge things that would go in the freezer and snack on that, or snack on an apple, make a matcha latte. And then for dinner, I would go all out. I bought an Instant Pot and made all this I made barbecue chicken, but because you can't have barbecue sauce, it was you literally had to make everything from scratch. I spent 5 hours in the kitchen every day.
Yeah, and see that is the rub. That is a scary thought for anybody.
Totally.
Because, and especially when you're cooking for one, and even when you're cooking for two, then you get the whole oh, I've got a family that I want to, you've got children that have a different allergy. This one's got that issue. Your husband's got this. Your boyfriend's got that. Your girlfriend's got that. Your wife has this. I mean, you talk about all of these different things that have come up that we have to not eat or eat. And it's like a full-time job to nourish yourself now. And that is what I think is very frustrating in food as a whole. In fact, there's a gal that I interviewed. She was on, she's distributed a couple weeks ago. And we talked about simplicity in food, that it should not be this time consuming and it should not be this difficult to nourish our bodies. And she said something really interesting about how the relationship that you have with food is the longest relationship you will ever have in your entire life. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we work so hard on our friendships and we work so hard on our relationships with our spouse and our partners and what have you. We don't work on that relationship with food. At least I don't. And my sweetie doesn't either. We have two different eating disorders. He loves food too much and I don't like it enough. So we're a challenge in of itself. So you get to this point where you're cooking all of the time and all that, but that was for a short duration of time. Yes?
So I stayed on AIP for about 9 months, and let me tell you, I took time off between university and postgrad.
Okay.
So when I say that I had the ability to make that my quote unquote job because I wasn't paying for it, I was living at home, and my dad was also included. So it was I was cooking for everyone. No one else had to worry. So even though it was time consuming, I enjoyed it because I knew I was nourishing everyone and not just nourishing myself. But when we think about how much time it takes in the kitchen, this is where meal prep is going to be really important. So, taking 1 day or 2 days a week, you do it on a Sunday and you do it on a Thursday, or you do it on a Sunday, you do it on a Wednesday, and you're prepping your meals and you're prepping your snacks and you're keeping them in the fridge or the freezer and things are done. The great thing about AIP or paleo or whatever is that you're pretty much acknowledging any possible restriction that most people have, unless they have some severe allergy, like mushrooms, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, mine's cantaloupe. I have an EpiPen because of cantaloupe. I goes into an anaphylactic shock.
Jesus.
Jesus. But what's so interesting about it too is that it's also topical. So for me, with cantaloupe, I didn't find this out. I was in Deer Valley, which is in Park City, Utah, and it's this fancy resort. Anyway, so my family, we have a house there. And so my ex-husband and I were living there at the time. I went with one of my girlfriends to go get a facial at Deer Valley, and she'll remember this like yesterday. And I came out of there looking like I had a skin peel of my face, which I did not, because I had said, you have to check for melon in your products before you put them on me. They didn't really believe me. And so I came out looking like a burn victim. And then they came out and they were like, oh my gosh, well, we're not going to charge you for today. I'm like, oh, thank you. And so
I'm going to sue you for today.
Yeah, exactly. But I had said, and I had spoken, literally in all the paperwork, it says, do not put anything melon on my skin. So anyways, nonetheless, it's just those little idiosyncrasies. That's a weird, random allergy, which I've found is actually more common than you think. But people just it's just random. I don't even eat fruit salad in a restaurant that may or may not have had we'll take the cantaloupe out. I'm like, no. If there's cantaloupe in the kitchen, I'm not eating here. Not happening.
People don't realize how severe those allergies are and how quick it happens. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. That's actually the difference between an allergy and an intolerance, right? Where people can feel crappy after gluten or feel crappy after dairy, but it's not.
It's not allergy
mediated in terms of a right away response. It's immune mediated with a very different type it activates the immune system differently. So it can take up to 72 hours to feel a response. It's not happening instantaneously. It's called IgE and IgG, but we're getting too scientific and I don't want to do it.
She leans in really close to the camera so you like see her nostrils. So you did this thing you said for 9 months. You took a little bit of a break in there. So what are you doing now?
So now I actually was working with clients on their gut. Honestly, it ended up being mostly parasite cleansing because, I was struggling. It turned out with a massive parasitic infection. I also now know I have like Lyme disease and other co-infections. So just doing AIP wasn't the answer. It was really great in terms of getting rid of inflammation. But at the end of the day, you really have to get to those infections and get rid of them or your body will never fully, truly heal. So I was working with clients doing a lot of parasite cleansing, candida cleansing. I like to do quote unquote IBS because, as I always like to say, it's a doctor's lazy term when there's no time given to really take a peek at what's going on beneath the surface. I like to call myself like the little Nancy Drew, like, okay, well, are we dealing with low stomach acid? Because that can elicit IBS symptoms. Are we dealing with parasites? Because that can elicit IBS symptoms. Is there candida? Is there SIBO? Is there H. pylori? Like all the things that we hear are underlying root causes of probably the world's most diagnosed stomach condition we know as IBS.
Yeah, because it's a junk diagnosis. It's kind of like fibromyalgia where they're like, well, okay, we're just going to throw all of this into that because I've been treated for IBS. I've had my colonoscopies. I've had this. I've had that. Nothing came of any of it. Nothing got fixed. But you brought up H. pylori. I was just diagnosed with it. And I know you and I have talked about it, about we need to get working on what I'm going to do about this. Can you talk about what it is? This just is an example because I'm interested more in it. But we found out about it because of a Dutch test that I took. And I wouldn't have known about it had I not done these tests. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because I'm interested and maybe other people may have it. So
honestly, sorry to disappoint, but not too much because it is not my area of expertise and it never was. But it is a bacteria at the end of the day that can wreak havoc on the digestive system. And it can elicit a lot of symptoms that mimic acid reflux because you can get the burping and you can get the heartburn. I know that you can eradicate it. A lot of people go the medical route. So they'll take a medication or an antibiotic.
It's like mountains of antibiotics. It's like rounds and rounds of it. And I'm like, no way. I can't kill all the good stuff, man.
Right. So for you and for anyone else who's on an antibiotic, it's really important to ensure you're taking a probiotic. I say with the antibiotic, but 2 hours apart, but the duration of the antibiotic plus a month after. And you can also take something called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is an inactive yeast. And you can take that with the antibiotic. So it's preventing the proliferation of those opportunistic bacteria. So there are ways to ensure that you're protecting the gut when you're on antibiotics. But obviously, if you can avoid it, you want to. There are natural ways and natural antifungals and antibacterials and all the things that you can do. Mesquite gum is like one of the main herbs you want to look for in those supplements that you'll know is targeted towards H. pylori. But at the end of the day, you want to think, okay, well, why is it that I got that? What am I missing that my body allowed this to happen? Because when you think of parasites and you think of bacteria, I always come back to low stomach acid because the stomach acid is there to ensure these things don't survive. But here's the kicker. You go to the doctor and you're like, I'm burping, I have acid reflux, I have heartburn, and they put you on proton pump inhibitors. They never assume or they never think, okay, this could be actually too little stomach acid. They have very much the same symptoms where if you don't have enough stomach acid and food is sitting in the gut and it's fermenting, it's creating gas and that gas has to go somewhere. So it escapes and it comes and it travels back up. So you're belching and it's burning and it's uncomfortable. But what happens when you knock out all stomach acid like you do with a proton pump inhibitor or Nexium and those types of Zantac? I don't know really what the states.
You're like Pepcid and omeprazolone or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So when you take those and you shut off all your stomach acid, you can think of your stomach acid as your army. It's like your first line of defense against infection. They are your soldiers, like your internal soldiers keeping you protected. And you knock those guys out and you eat something contaminated of any sort, that's where your body can't then protect itself.
I like that.
Yeah. So when we look at why is someone getting recurrent parasites? Why is someone getting recurrent infections? Part of getting to the root cause and like dealing with those infections is looking at why. So stomach acid is so important. We want to replenish that right from the beginning. And now we're going to be able to absorb protein. We'll be able to keep iron up, B12. All of these are related to stomach acid. Believe it or not, I think I said digestive protein. Constipation, this will help with constipation. Like it just anyone who has like the fingernail ridges or splitting, like there are so many things that come down to low stomach acid that people are kind of like, I'm going to do something topical for this, but then something else happens because we haven't actually fixed it.
Yeah. So what do you do for low stomach acid? Because you're naming a bunch of things and I'm like, shit, great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Which I bet a lot of listeners are as well going, oh man, like I've got gnarly, like the stomach acid, like the GERD or whatever, right?
Yes.
And that's a random new thing. Like I never had that before. And so I've got that going. And then I was telling you yesterday, like I'm burping like crazy. What's happening? So you're bringing up all of these red flags that I already experienced, but I know a lot of the reasons why. That's why I'm here to have you help fix me.
Totally. I actually like to get my clients or anyone I'm just like talking about this to do, I call it the bake. Well, I don't call it that. It's called the baking soda challenge. I didn't make it up. And essentially what you do, it's not foolproof, but it's a really good way to test without actually taking a stomach acid capsule first. You do about a quarter teaspoon of baking soda in 8 ounces of water. And you time how long it's going to take you to burp. I like to say do it 3 mornings in a row so we can really average, because I've had clients do it and they burp with 30 seconds and the next morning is 5 minutes. So I like to get a good average. The longer it takes you to burp, the lower the stomach acid you have. So if you're burping within 2 minutes, I'm like, hey, that's great. But if you're burping 5 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, I'm like, your stomach acid is insufficient. And that's why you're experiencing one of the reasons. Ways to quote unquote fix it, because it's also kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it pathogens that cause low stomach acid or low stomach acid that cause pathogens? So you have to get rid of everything and reestablish the environment. But for stomach acid, you can actually take betaine HCl, which is stomach acid, in a capsule. You can take something like apple cider vinegar, which is acidic.
I hate apple cider vinegar so much. I've tried it. I've tried it in so many different ways. Even Brad's like the number one out there, you know? And I mean, supposed to take like a shot of it or something every morning, and all it would do is make me puke.
No, I actually wouldn't do that. I would do it with your meal, because you don't need to have stomach acid when you're doing nothing.
So then I never have to drink apple cider or vinegar because I don't eat all that much.
Sure.
No, but okay. So there's ways to get around to doing a supplementation, obviously changing the way that we eat too, of course.
Well, yeah. I mean, anyone who's dealing with, you can also think of your triggers. If your triggers are fried, fatty foods and garbage oil, don't eat it. Like, just don't eat it.
Yeah, that's kind of like, duh.
Yeah. And if you have triggers like spice, don't eat it. Just avoid it. Your body is telling you it doesn't tolerate it. It doesn't want it. It doesn't need it. Just cut it out. You'll live. But if it's like after every meal, if it's especially like 3 hours, 2 hours after you've eaten and you're experiencing a lot of bloating and upset, then you're looking at low stomach acid. Your food is sitting there and fermenting in the gut.
That's so gross when you think about it.
And then again, when you have fermentation, we're feeding the opportunistic bacteria. So it's just this massive negative feedback loop. So when you interrupt it, you can start to fix it and get control of your symptoms pretty much right away. Taking betaine has been so helpful for me. Taking ox bile has been so helpful for me. Pancreatic enzymes. And that can actually all come in one capsule. There is a brand that does it and they're fantastic. They're in the States and in Canada, Designs for Health. They're amazing. One of my favorite supplement lines.
So what do we do? Like first steps, here I am. Here's a listener. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like 50% or 90% or 100% of the things that Rachel was just talking about. What is your recommendation for first steps on things that we can do to at least start to heal our gut and go the right direction outside of going to doctors and having them putting on some medication that will not do anything for us? Food.
Cut out your trigger and inflammatory foods. Cut out your seed oils, cut out gluten, cut out conventional dairy, and anything, to be honest, I don't care if people hate me for this. Your vegan diet, is not supporting your gut. All the legumes and the lectins and things in legumes, A, they're very gaseous, B, they're very high in omega-6, so we're contributing to inflammation. Very hard to heal when we're consuming all those types of beans and legumes.
Well, and also a lot of vegan food is super processed too.
Super processed.
Yeah. And soy, like I don't eat soy anymore, especially women. No. It was the complete opposite, right? It was like women, soy all the time. Oh my God, it's so bad for us.
No, but then you'll have someone argue it's a phytoestrogen and this and that. And I'm just like, just get rid of it completely. The other thing is I have a lot of people who will say, well, I can't digest meat and I feel crappy when I eat meat. Okay, well, let's evaluate a couple of things. A, what's your stomach acid levels? That's number one. That's going to digest your protein. If you can't digest it, of course, you're going to feel like shit. B, you are what your animal eats, not what you eat. So if your animal is a conventionally raised cow eating growth hormones and antibiotics and God knows what's in their feed, of course, you're going to feel like crap.
On top of standing in a huge field of their own feces.
Yeah. But you want grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and then you can tell me how you feel. And then also don't eat double the portion. Most people are eating 2 times the amount they should be eating. They're eating an 8-ounce piece of steak. Well, of course, it's very heavy. You should be eating the size of the palm of your hand. So for me, that's 4 ounces about. I feel good when I have 4 ounces of meat. I go over 4 ounces, I hit 6 to 8 ounces, I'm feeling really heavy. Well, no wonder I'm feeling heavy. Like it's just way too much.
Yeah.
So portion control. So honestly, when I start working with people and we address their diet right away, I get results right away. And it's not a coincidence. It's just fact.
Yeah. You make it sound that this episode is kind of like, it sounds like it's a lot to do, but it also doesn't sound like it's a lot to do. I think it really comes down to, we're all afraid to give up the things that we love very much. Like me, the hardest thing that I've done is cheese. I mean, just absolutely the hardest thing that I've had to do because I love cheese. I just do. But I can't do it anymore. I mean, I just can't. But to your point, like, oh, well, you just had a little bit of cheese. I guess I can't do just a little bit of cheese, but it makes everything taste so much more wonderful.
Put nutritional yeast on.
So what is nutritional yeast exactly? Because I've read it in all kinds of like, oh, replace your cheese with this. It sounds disgusting.
I also think it's an inactive yeast like the Saccharomyces boulardii, but it has a cheesy flavor to it and it's very high in B12 from my understanding.
Okay.
But also when you were mentioning, cheese, I think I wanted to say there comes a time where people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And at that point, like with myself, you give up the things you love because being and feeling good and healthy is more important than that piece of cheese. And I've had people come to me being like, well, you know what? I'm a huge foodie and I won't give this up. And I said, well, see you later. I can't help you.
Yeah.
Because how badly do you want it? Because I don't want to sit here and waste my time and try to help you when you don't really want to help yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's totally true. Like I'm here every day, like this is all the stuff that I'm doing and these are the great things that I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work, like a lot of work. It's a full-time job. The last thing on my list that I'm working on is food. And so it's official. Like it is official, Lyndsay. And I can tell the difference when I do make changes, that it happens actually fairly quickly when I start to feel better. And that in and of itself is the gift, right? Because you're like, oh, wow, okay, I made that little change and I feel this much better. There are sometimes like when I eliminated gluten and dairy and alcohol entirely, I didn't have much change, not with my gut, certainly not with my pain. But what I did was I did a lot of elimination, but I didn't add foods that would help support nerve damage, my gut, pain, anti-inflammation. I didn't add stuff. I took stuff out. And so that people are like, oh, you need to eliminate, but they're not like, oh, well, you need to add these things though too. So there's that disconnect in that. And with meal planning, it's hard to do, I mean, it's a lot of work and I don't want it to be a lot of work. I really don't. So your gut, and when we opened up, you were talking about how yours isn't perfect yet either, right? We're never going to be perfect, guys, but we can at least be a little bit healthier each day if we just work at one or two things. Like, for example, our housekeeper was up at the LA house this weekend and my sweetie was down here with me and I texted her and I'm like, please remove all of the Diet Coke from the refrigerator. Just leave him one can. Because I talked to him and I said, hey, honey, he's like, I am on a mission. Like, I've got to lose weight and I've got to do this and I've got to change that and all. And I'm like, okay, well, remember when you stopped drinking Diet Coke, you dropped weight like nobody's business. It was so fast and it was just that one change. And it's so bad for him, you know? And so he got home last night and was like, you weren't kidding.
You really did it.
I did.
You really did it.
But it's one small change here and one small change there. They can add up to being a mountain of amazing changes that you make. You don't have to like immediately take every single thing that you've ever loved out of your life wherever. We just have to make a little change here and a little change there so that we're not shocking ourselves, because I know that that's a lot of the reasons why diets and fads and stuff come and go, because they're so overwhelming. Then you buy a bunch of stuff that you're like, oh, get on this health kick. You end up tossing it because it ends up actually being bad for you. And so there's so many steps along the way that I really want to preach that we have to do this. It doesn't have to be as complicated as it all sounds, but we have to do it.
Right.
We have to do it.
With that being said, there are some people who doing things cold turkey is the only way it's going to work for them. And that's fine too. You have to go at your own pace and what works best for you. But if I can leave people, with a couple takeaways of like maybe something they can implement, I would start your morning with like freshly squeezed lemon water and Celtic sea salt. Like start to alkalize that body right away. Most of us are walking chronic systemic inflammatory bodies. So acidic. We want to, even though, lemon is acidic as a fruit, inside the body when we consume it, it actually is very alkalizing. So, having lemon water in the morning before your cup of coffee, a great way to start your day and such an easy change to implement and just add. Pre-cut your lemon should you choose to, so that you don't have to do it every morning and it's there for you. I would take 4 deep belly breaths before your meal so that we're activating the vagus nerve and we're getting into this rest and digest mode as opposed to being wired in fight or flight. Because when we're in that mode, our body isn't focused on digesting. Our body is focused on fleeing from danger. So, implementing stress management strategies or not eating at your desk is a really great way to turn off that stress pathway and kind of have a place designated for food and a place designated for work if you can. I know some people can't, and that's okay. You just work around it. But, like you said, just some small changes. It doesn't have to be all at once. I was the type of person that I knew if I was doing AIP, it wasn't all at once thing. It was a full turkey. I'm cutting everything out and this is the day I'm starting and let me prepare for it. And I succeeded that way. And that's what worked for me. We're all individuals. You started this podcast by saying we're all individuals and we should all be treated as individuals. And so therefore, whatever works for you as a person is what you should be implementing to your daily routine or shifting or taking out, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great. And that's good. Wise wisdom. Yes, with Rachel and Lyndsay. Our new podcast. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for being here with me, because I know that my gut is the one thing that I've been avoiding. I mean, it just has been. And I'm circling the drain like big time with it. And I know, it's officially time. And I'm glad that my sweetie and I are kind of aligned at the same time that we're going to make some changes in the food department in our world. And it's going to help with us not going back and forth between Los Angeles, Orange County as well. So I'm looking forward to reporting back on some changes, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks again for being here, Rach. And but everybody go with your gut and listen to my dear Rachel and pick up some books on, gut health and do some research on it and start, one of the things that I was very successful at was journaling food, what I was eating and what I was feeling when I actually ate something, what I felt after a certain amount of time after. That seemed to work really well for me when I was doing this a while back. And then I just kind of fell off the wagon. So I'm back on. And so thank you again.
Thank you.
You are exclusively invited to share this gut-wrenching Nancy Drew VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. Please follow the Pain Game Podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. And don't forget to give the show a review or 2. Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.